All right, I believe that it is 10 o'clock and we're going to get started with our webinar. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. This is the third in our series of Farm to Early Care webinars. We're going to have 4 total. My name is Erin McKee. I am the Farm to Institution Program Director here at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. So our goal with these webinars, basically, we've been doing a lot of work with different early care partners and we do a lot of trainings with them, and we wanted to distill the trainings that we do into something that we can share out with the public so that you can all have access to it and use it in any way that's helpful for you if you're trying to get started or expand your own farm to early care program. This webinar today is focusing specifically on the education staff piece of farm to early care. So we know that those of you who are education staff, you're with the kids all day, you get to do classroom activities with them. A lot of times you're eating your meals with them as well, and some of you are even cooking the meals that the kids are eating. So you play a very important role for the kids in their nutrition education and in implementing any kind of farm to early care activity. So we really are excited today to be able to share our training that we do with education staff around farm to early care with you. And we also have an excellent guest speaker, a Headstart teacher and family advocate, Barika Davis, who's going to share her experience with you all today as well. So thanks so much for joining us. And I do want to mention funding for this project is provided in part by the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota and also from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. We're very lucky to have their support in letting us share this work with all of you. So we will get started, and Katie is going to share a little bit of information about how the webinar works with you.
Thanks, Erin. So before we get started, I just wanted to draw your attention to the control panel at the bottom of your screen here. You're able to ask questions of the panelists or of me and Erin by using the Q&A function. If you have any sort of technical difficulties, like your audio is not working or you aren't able to view the video, please use that chat function and let us know, and we'll try and troubleshoot on our end. We'll get to as many questions as we have time for. After we hear from Barika, we'll have a short period for Q&A, and then we'll also leave some time at the end. But just feel free to use that Q&A function and send those questions in as you think of them. After the webinar, you'll be able to view this webinar as a recording. It'll be posted on our website, and we'll also send an evaluation, a short survey after webinar. We'd love your feedback. So look out for that in a follow-up email from us. So let's go ahead and get started.
All right. So the first question that we want to make sure everyone's on the same page about is, what is farm to early care? So basically, the most basic definition is that we're trying to make a connection between these very young kids in early care settings. So those are ages up to 6 years old. With food and farming, and linking them to their nearby small and mid-sized farmers and ranches that are producing fresh, healthy foods that can be in their meals. And then we also do classroom activities and family engagement around food and farming to help make that connection real for them. When we say early care, I do want to make sure that you know that we're embracing all of the different early care settings. So of course, it's a very complicated world. We are including the full spectrum of child care delivery in that, including Headstart, preschools, in-home care, center-based programs, K-12 programs, things like that that are providing care to these young kids. So we do also want to make sure that it can be a little bit confusing, but farm to early care is not one set program that you have to follow exact activities to be enrolled in. You get to choose any kinds of farm to early care activities that work for you, and you can say that you're doing farm to early care. So there's no prescriptive rules about what you need to do, and there's no program that you enroll in to say that you're doing farm to early care. It's a very flexible program. We're going to talk about the different types of activities that you can do in this webinar. But different components that you might choose to do are sourcing local foods to serve in the meals, trying to do classroom activities, doing field trips, doing gardening activities, cooking activities, family engagement, all of those kinds of things can count as farm to early care. They all fall under this umbrella. So there are many different goals. We'll talk a little bit about the different benefits that these programs can have. And we also want to say that there's a component of it where we're thinking about the big picture of the system and the environment that the children are going, that are existing in the early care setting. So there are ways that you can use these programs to kind of change the big picture to influence the health and benefits to your community. So with that basic definition and background, we're just going to start out before we get into all of the details and kind of nitty-gritty of the definition and benefits. We'll hear from Barika Davis, who's going to share her own experience implementing a Farm to Headstart program. And it's very great that we were able to get her to present today because she was involved with the program that we helped support in St.Cloud, or both in St.Cloud and in St. Paul, Minnesota. So she has a lot of experience that she can share with us today and can really make it real for you. So welcome, Barika. Thank you so much for being here, and I will let you take it away and share your experience. Katie is going to ask some different questions of Barika, and she can tell us more about what she experienced doing farm to early care.
Great. Thanks, Erin, and welcome, Barika. We're so excited to have you here and really excited to hear your perspective on implementing some of these programs in the classroom. So why don't you just go ahead and start by sort of giving us a little bit of background on your position and how you came to be in early care.
So my name is Barika Davis. Thanks, Erin, for the great intro, and Katie. My background is in early childhood education with an emphasis in special education. My career first started at Community Action Partnership of Washington and Ramsey County in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I had the pleasure of working with the Headstart organization. And that was kind of where I got my first initial exposure to Farm to Headstart. And then I ended up transitioning up to St. Cloud, Minnesota, where I'm currently a teacher/family advocate for the organization. And I had the pleasure of rolling out this program for the first year here and using the experience that I had gained in St. Paul to help really just push the program forward.
Great. So it sounds like before you moved up to St. Cloud, you had previous experience with Farm to Headstart in St. Paul.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more about some of the reasons why you were excited about bringing Farm to Headstart up to St. Cloud?
I was really excited because in St. Paul, some of the families that I got to work with were from various different culture backgrounds, and just kind of seeing how they use the process of growing foods to get to the table and their own culture to the classroom. So, for example, the families that I worked with in St. Paul, a lot of them were Hmong American, Korean American, and those families that I work with, they had a huge background in farming. They had multi-generational families living with them, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles living under the same household. So they were very exposed to, gardening and things like that. But then I came to St. Cloud, and the families that I had from refugee families were from the country. So it was exciting for me to see, okay, well, I know that families, once they have the experience with it, that they will be able to just take on with it. So just having that knowledge about what could possibly be was amazing. And that's kind of like how that's why I was really excited, because I got to see how it affected one community in St. Paul and how it could definitely potentially help families in the St. Cloud community that do not have the same exposure to the multi-generational families living under one roof.
Great, thank you. So keeping that in mind, kind of what was your approach to incorporating Farm to Headstart themes into some of your daily classroom activities?
The curriculum that was provided to us, the early Head Start, Farm to Head Start curriculum, went great with the curriculum that we had, which is teaching strategies, is the curriculum that we use for our program. So what I did was I looked through the curriculum after I had some time, and I really just tried to match up what strengths are in the curriculum that was provided through the early Head Start than the teaching strategies curriculum that we had. So for example, in our classroom, we have intentional teaching cards. And within those intentional teaching cards, it kind of lays out how you can do an experiment, or how you can provide information to the kids in a fun way. So then I looked at the curriculum that was provided, and I was like, okay, here's a game that the kids can play. For example, we had green beans, and the kids, and the curriculum that we had, it was a graphing one. So I had each kid open up their green beans and count the number of seeds that were inside of it. Worked perfect. It was in the curriculum, and it was in our teaching strategies curriculum. The kids counted it, we got to graph. So not only did they get to use the food and see what it was like, one, they got to taste it afterwards, which every kid was excited about. And then two, we got some math in there, and it went straight along with the curriculum. That's what I loved about it. It was no extra work. Just a little bit of preparation as far as looking at which one you wanted to pull, but standard teacher preparation. I loved it. My kids loved it because they got to try the foods. I was just really excited, and it flowed really, really well.
Great. So it sounds like your approach was really to see how the farm to early care curriculum from IATP matched up with the sort of teaching infrastructure that you were already using.
Yes.
And making sure that you weren't sort of doubling up and, doing work that you didn't necessarily have to do.
Correct.
Great. So did you have some goals for the kids in your classroom as far as, when it comes to trying new foods, or getting really hands-on with a particular activity? Sort of what were your goals for your classroom?
So in my classroom, what I made was we made taste passports. And so each kid got to basically take a couple pieces of paper and staple it together. And before we even got the fruit or the vegetable, we drew what they thought it would look like. So we had some friends who never seen green beans before, and they drew just a brown, like a stick. And they're like, I think it looks like a stick. And so just getting them exposed to that. Okay, my end goal was to have them understand more about the fruits and vegetables that were probably grown in their local community. So we did that. And then after that, we would read a bio about a farmer. And this is the farmer that grew green beans, and this is the farmer that grows apples. And the kids, okay, so as a farmer is a person who grows these things, and I eat them. Okay, I got it. And then what we would do is they would, within their passport, the day that we had the food, the kids would taste it, and every kid would taste it, whether they didn't like it, whether, they were like, it's okay, maybe next time. And then they would give a thumbs up if they thought it was amazing and they just wanted to eat all the food on their plate. It's to the side, it was okay, I'll take a couple bites, but definitely no more. And then a thumbs down, maybe next time I'll try it. They would take a bite and they would just say, it's not for me. And luckily with the program that we had set up in St. Cloud, they had lots of different opportunities to taste it in lots of different settings, whether it was outside, fresh from the garden, whether it was from the farmer, straight off the van. It was amazing. Or whether it was cooked. And so it gave them opportunities to be exposed to it. And that was my end goal, was just to be exposed to the things that are locally produced in your community.
Wonderful. So if you could sort of distill down what you learned throughout the first year of the program, how, based on your first year's experience, how would you do things differently if you would do them differently at all for next year's program?
The thing that I think for me that I would do differently, at least from what I gather from other staff that were also doing the program, was just really making sure you have time to look through that curriculum and aligning it with the curriculum that maybe your current program is already using. Because like I said, no teacher wants to spend too much time doing additional work on top of the work that they're already doing, and just saying, okay, how could I align this with our program? And so what I did is, just like I talked about before, love it, like it, maybe next time, we graphed it. And since we do graphs all the time, I'm like, okay, this aligns perfect with the curriculum. We're graphing all the time. Math is there. I need those things that I don't really have to think about to incorporate into my daily setting for the kids to be exposed and to see what it's like, and to see the growth that each student is having. But for my biggest thing, the takeaway would be just making sure I have enough prep time to look back at the curriculum that was provided with the curriculum that is required within our organization. I think that's the biggest thing. And I did that the first couple weeks. I didn't take that time. And I think that is why in the beginning I kind of struggled. But once I did that, it was so easy. It was a no-brainer.
Great. So you sort of jumped ahead to my final question, which is, what advice do you have for other teachers who might be implementing farm to early care programs for the first time? Sort of tips or words of wisdom that you might have, aside from what you've already said about looking through the curriculum and seeing where those alignments might be opportunities for implementing sort of putting farm and food themes into the activities that you're already doing?
Really be excited. I am have a very exuberant personality. So if I do not like something, I tend to be like, oh, kind of reserved. But I just really held that back and just was excited about it, even if I didn't like it, because the kids feed off of that. So if that's the only advice I could give, would be really be excited about it. And it even could be a game. So who wants to try the green bean with me? And even if they don't like it, everybody wants to be with the cool person. So yeah, I'll try it with you. I'll try it. Give me that green bean. Oh, are you ready? And do a big countdown. Make it a big celebration. And the kids would just eat that up. Oh, three, two, did everybody get one? Yeah. And then they would take a bite. And even if they didn't like it, the students who said, that is just not for me, I tried it though. And they would all say, you tried it though, way to go. But yeah, I'm so glad you took that step. So just really being excited about it, even if it's not your favorite. If you don't like broccoli, you better make that the Hercules broccoli of the world.
Oh my gosh, Barika, that is really good advice. I feel like that's something that I've heard from other staff that we've worked with too. And also from other, I've heard staff who said that they saw like some of their colleagues who wouldn't be really enthusiastic about something, and they could really see the difference if they didn't like something and they kind of said like, oh, peppers, then the kids would not want to try it. So that is really important advice, I think.
I think that is definitely true. Even the staff that were in my own classroom who had a different table, and they would do things a little bit differently. So we sat down and had a meeting, and I was like, even if you don't like snap peas and you've never liked them at the table at dinner, and your mom would make you sit there and you would just stare at them, I said, snap peas are going to be your favorite thing today.
Yeah.
And they would just get really excited about it. And the kids, and they would be honest, you know what, not today, but maybe next time. And the kids would say, yeah, but maybe next time. And it's okay not to like it. And we'll just try it in a different setting.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a little bit of time where we can have questions from our attendees, and you can feel free to just type the questions in either to the chat box or the Q&A. And then we can ask them of Barika. She has to go to another 10 meetings after this, I believe it was. So she can't stay with us for the whole time. So if you have a question for Barika, do type it in right now. And I have one question that I wanted to ask you, Barika. So what did you see from your fellow staff? What was the reaction to the program at the beginning? And was there any change that you saw over time as the program went on from the beginning training to actually implementing the program over the first season?
Yes. So initially the staff were very reluctant. They were, this is just going to be more work. Do you not have more work to do? And I told them, I was like, it might be more work in since I had the previous experience in St. Paul with the program. I said, but the kids, they really enjoy it. So at first, when they were kind of reluctant to try those fruits and vegetables, and then they noticed when their attitude changed that the kids actually tried more, they quickly changed it. And so we just did gardening because our program goes until June 23rd. So we just had garden, and the kids were making those connections, and the staff in my room were like, that's just like an aha moment. No, they made that connection. I said, right? They understood that this seed will grow and and so they'd be at the table, and we would ask, once they had the pineapple, how do you think the pineapple grew? And the staff would just be inquiring more and more and more and probing the kids, and they would love to discuss where they think their food comes from. But yeah, it was amazing. I really give props to my staff because they transformed from not really being excited about it to just getting on board and really kind of learning new things themselves.
Yeah, I have totally seen that with our partners, other partners too. And actually that staff end up learning right along with the kids. That's been really interesting. Or other like families and parents and other staff members also try new foods through doing the programs too. Let's see, we have a couple questions here. Katie, did you want to answer? Someone is asking about where they can find the Farm to Head Start curriculum that Barika is talking about.
Yes, so IATP, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, developed a Farm to Head Start curriculum, and which is posted for free in its full form on our website. After the webinar, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to access that curriculum. I'll send out a link to that in the follow-up email, but it's also available, like I said, on our website.
And we will talk a little bit more about our curriculum later in the webinar too. Barika, we also have a question about the passport. Could you describe that a little bit more? And how did it work? Did every kid get their own passport, and did they get it stamped as they tried foods, or how did that work?
Yes, so the passport was basically a book. So we took a couple loose leaf pieces of white paper, and in the inside of the book, it had it like a square, and it had the dates that we were going to try specific fruits and vegetables. So the kids each got a preview when we were making this book. We were talking about, oh, you're going to get to try this, and you're going to get to try this, and it had the exact day on it. And so the students wrote their name in the passport, kind of took a little bit of ownership, if you would say. And then as we tried the fruits and vegetables, we had stickers to correlate. And we had a green sticker for, oh, I loved it. Just give me more and more. I'm just going to eat these up. And it was a green smiley face. And then if maybe next time I took a couple bites, it's okay, maybe not for me. And then it was yellow. And then our third sticker was red, which it was still all smiley faces. So we were wanting to encourage them, like, even if you don't like it, there's still an incentive. And it was just, maybe next time, this just wasn't for me. I took a hair bite and I don't think so. And through the pages, so they would get their sticker on the front. And day one, before they even got to see the fruit and vegetable, before we even had the farmer, they drew in those pages. And the pages each had one labeled. And we would put at the top, if we were trying green beans, it would say green beans raw form. So that they knew that, okay, I like to cook. I didn't like when it just came straight off the van from the farmer. But yeah, so it was just loose leaf paper with an image on the inside cover that had each fruit and vegetable that we were going to try. And then each kid got a sticker that said, loved it, like it, maybe next time, with a smiley face, according to
I love the positive framing that you use too, instead of saying like didn't like it, to say maybe next time. I think that's really important too.
Yeah. Great. And the kids use that with all of our food, aside from the Farm to Head Start. Then they start transitioning. Maybe next time too. Maybe next time. And I think it really helped because they would try it the next time it come, and they're like, last time I said maybe next time, I'm going to try it this time.
Yes.
Yes.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Barika. I think we're out of time for questions right now, but we so appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I know you're really busy, but as you can see, attendees, her enthusiasm is very infectious, and this is a great example of the power of these education staff to really be a catalyst for these programs to succeed. And I know that the St. Cloud program was very successful, and it's definitely due to the hard work of people like Barika. So thank you for sharing your experience with us today.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I just hope to all the future educators and educators now that you really give the program a start, a try, and just really be enthusiastic about it, because you yourself will learn a lot.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, so now we are going to share a little bit more of the details of our model with all of you, and get into, first we'll share a little bit about the benefits of farm to early care programs, and then we'll get into actually how does it look on the ground, how do you actually do these programs. And then we'll have time at the end for questions for us as well. So I'll pass it over to Katie to talk a little bit about why we focus on early care.
Thanks, Erin, and thanks to Barika. What a great presentation. So IATP has been working on farm to institution programs for the past 10 years. But since about 2012, we've really focused in on the early care setting, because we realized the benefits are so enormous of focusing on children's taste preferences while they're still forming, when they're in this age range of about 0 to 6 years old. So at this age, some children are in early care from before the time their parents go to work in the mornings until after they get home from work. So they can consume potentially up to 80% of their daily energy in an early care setting. So that's breakfast, lunch, maybe dinner, and a snack or two. So that's a lot of food and a lot of opportunities for children to interact with food. We know obviously preschool age children have really no opportunity to get or to cook their own food. So they're pretty dependent on their parents or their caregivers to create food environments that are inviting and provide them, with healthy foods. Early eating patterns really are sort of the stepping stones to later eating patterns. And so we want to make sure that we're providing kids opportunities to create those healthy habits as early on as possible. We know that unfortunately childhood obesity is still very prevalent in the United States. It's more than doubled in the past 30 years, with some of the most dramatic increases in those rates occurring among preschoolers. So farm to early care is really a public health strategy as we see it for earlier obesity prevention. And farm to early care works best with a lot of experiential education, which is how children learn to begin with. This way of teaching is sort of the norm in early care environments, so it's a really good fit. Farm to early care is a good fit for this environment. As Barika mentioned, kids can really be the agents of change in not only in school, but in their family as well. We've seen with our partners that sometimes children will be requesting more fruits and vegetables when they go grocery shopping with their parents. And parents are always really surprised when their kids are willing and enthusiastic about eating foods their parents never thought they would be interested in eating. And farm to early care activities sort of set the stage for kids to participate in farm to school when they get into elementary and beyond. So those are some of the reasons why we care and why we really try and promote farm to early care. So we like to say that farm to early care programs are sort of a win-win-win. Obviously, kids are sort of we think of them as the primary beneficiaries, but there's also other benefits to the farmers who are supplying those foods and to the communities and the economy in general. So we'll now dive into some of the reasons why these are important for kids before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty of how the program actually works on the ground. So as I said, one of the most obvious benefits for children is improved nutrition. Studies have shown that only about 1% of preschool age children are meeting the recommended servings of fruits and vegetables. So we see this as a way to get kids exposed to a greater variety of fruits and vegetables and to develop their taste preferences. So hopefully supporting them and getting them to actually enjoy eating fruits and vegetables. As I said before, it does help prevent obesity and obesity-related diseases by establishing a taste preference for fruits and vegetables and not just for packaged or higher fat and higher sugar foods. And an increased willingness to try new foods, as Barika said, and she gave such a brilliant example of how teachers who are enthusiastic and really supportive can make that difference between maybe a child not wanting to eat a new food and taking that leap to taste that new food and really discovering that they enjoy it.
Great. Thank you very much. And I do want to also point out, in addition to what Katie said about kids developing their taste preferences at this age, we also have to remember that they're developing their ideas and concepts about food and farming, agriculture, and the environment at this time too. So it's a very important intervention point where we can influence those ideas and concepts, and that influences their whole approach to food in their lives. So it's really an important time to reach kids. I really love this slide. So if you look at the picture that's on the right-hand side, you can see these kids from, this is the St. Paul Headstart program, and they are actually visiting the farm of the Hmong American Farmers Association. So Barika mentioned that they have a really high Hmong population, and we worked together with the Hmong farmers, Hmong American Farmers Association, to supply the food to that program. And the farmers actually let the kids come on the field trip and actually harvest the food in their field while they were on the field trip. So you see the little kids have the beans in their hands. If you look on the left side, you see that the very next week, those kids got the same green beans from the Hafa farm in their meal. And this little girl is actually, she's opened up the green bean and she's showing me that there's a seed inside, because that's what they talked about when they were on the farm at their field trip. And in the middle, this is actually from one of the classroom activities that the teacher did. They did an art project where they were drawing the food item and they drew green beans. And I think if they had not labeled it, you may not know that this is a green bean, but you can see that that idea of the seeds really stuck with them because they got to see it live at the farm and then in the meal, and that really made an impression. You can see that they really understand the seed idea, and that's because they got to have that experiential learning, the hands-on learning time at the farm and in their meal. So this is just demonstrating the power of the connection that these programs can make with the kids between the farmer and their food. Let's see here. So of course, we love that this is a public health strategy for the kids, but IATP as an organization, we actually came to this work working on the farmer side of things. So we were really interested in creating a new market for farmers to sell their product, especially those farmers who it would actually make a big difference in their bottom line. So we like to focus on helping our early care partners connect with farmers that maybe don't have a big market share yet and maybe are disadvantaged in some way. So we did work with these Hmong American Farmers Association, immigrant, multi-generational family farmers. We really like to promote beginning farmers, women farmers, minority farmers, lots of farmers that this really makes a difference in their bottom line to get access to this market, to be able to have a stable amount of product that they know they're going to sell at a certain time. That's really powerful for them. They can sell a big volume of product at the same time, where before that they were mostly relying on farmers markets where they would just sell a little here, a little there, and they didn't know how much they were going to sell, and they might harvest everything, but then if it rained that day, no one came to the farmers market, and then they wasted all their product. They also see that it's a way to diversify their income. So a lot of the farmers that we work with, they might sell to institutions for part of their income, but then they still do sell for at farmers markets or with CSAs, those weekly boxes of food that they get directly to the consumer. And this can be a strategy to have multiple places where you're selling the product so that you're not relying on just one market to make sure that you're making money. So that can be really important. Not only is this an important strategy for the farmers, but it actually supports the local supply chain in general. So the other little logos that you have here are actually of other local companies that participated in the program with us. There's one, Russ Davis Wholesale, that is a local processor. They employ a lot of people. It's an employee-owned company. They are the ones that chop up the food. They wash it and they chop it up to be sent along. And in this case, we also worked with CKC Good Food Catering Company. So they are the ones that actually take the washed and chopped up food and then they cook it for the Headstart program in St. Paul. And they are an immigrant woman-owned company. That's a local company as well. So we can't forget that it's not just the farmers that we're benefiting when we make these purchases, but it's actually, there's a ripple effect, there's a multiplier effect, where for every dollar that you're spending on farm to school local food, there's actually a study that shows that there's an additional $2.16 that circulates in your local community, and that's creating jobs, it's creating vitality in your community. So it can be a real boost to the local economy, to the local agriculture sector to be supporting these programs. And that's really important because that food infrastructure really gives you control, the community has control over the food that they depend on to live. So that's important for us at IATP as well. We think about food access and local control, democratization of the food system. And along with that, this is one of my favorite pictures as well. We really think of this as a strategy to build connection and to build community ties. So we actually build relationships through these programs. The farmers get to know the kids, the farmers get to know the staff, and the staff get to know each other in a new way. Because when you talk about food, you talk about your own connection with food. There's so much there that relates to your culture, your family, your background. It really can be a way to deepen connections with each other and to create meaning in our food system. And that can be a little bit abstract, but it's one of the things that I value the most about these programs. So just know that this is something we think about a lot. We see it as very empowering for everyone involved to really take control, to make decisions about what you want in your food system, and then support that with your purchases. Let's see here. So now that we talked about the benefits, I know you guys are excited. How can I do this? How can I get this going in my own setting? So we're going to talk a little bit about our model and the way that our farm to early care program works on the ground, particularly related to the education staff. So there are other people that might be involved, but we're talking today about what it means for you as an education staff person to interact with this program, to implement this program. And I do want to just highlight that this is just one way to do farm to early care. We developed our model based on some of the best practices from research, and then also from a lot of advice from partners across the country who told us about what they were doing in their own places. But it's not the only way to do a program. And if there are parts of it that don't seem like it works for you, then you really can change it to fit your needs. It's really important to know that we always start with our partners talking about what are your goals? What are your values? What are you trying to promote with this program? Why do you want to do this? And when you start with that, then you can build the activities that you're going to do on that place of shared values and on your goals, making sure that you're meeting what you're really trying to achieve with doing a farm to early care program. That's really important. Once you start with those goals, you can think about what are the challenges that we're going to come up against as we're trying to implement, and how can we address those? Who are partners that we can get going and partner with us to make this program happen? And then we also like to see our partners build a leadership team within their early care setting of people that will all work together to make the program happen. Because if it's just one person, then that's too much for one person to actually keep it going and to institutionalize it. Our goal is always to create a program that can be sustainable into the future. So we think a lot about how can we make this just part of your regular way of doing things, not just a special program that's on the side. So these are the basic components of our program. We want the kids to be able to have multiple interactions with each food item that's highlighted in order to influence those taste preferences. So we know that kids need to encounter the food multiple times before they start to like it, especially at this age. It's totally developmentally appropriate for them to be afraid of new foods. And that's why Barika was saying maybe next time, because they don't know if they'll like it next time. Maybe they will. Then we want to get the food from the local farmers into their regular meals. So not just as a taste test, although you can start with a taste test, certainly, but we like to see it as part of their regular meal program. We have an experiential curriculum that we'll talk a little bit more about. We do family engagement activities so that the family knows what's going on and then they can support what's happening at home. We build relationships with the farmers, and then we also always try to include culturally responsive content. So we think about who is the community that we're interacting with here and what would really work for them. It might be something that wouldn't work in a different setting. So those are the basic components. We'll talk a little bit more about how that really works on the ground.
Great. So as Erin said, two of the main strategies that are involved in farm to early care programs are this idea of including local foods in regular meals and snacks and not having it be an additional component, but really integrating it into the regular meals and snacks. And then having multiple exposures to different foods. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But this is just an example of how that looks in terms of how people choose foods to highlight for their programs. So for example, this was an example of a food calendar that we used with a partner a couple of years ago. So the second half of June, they decided to focus on radishes, whereas the first half of July, for a couple of weeks, they would do sugar snap peas. And what you'll notice is that this really sort of highlights the idea of seasonality. And so we want to highlight foods at the peak of their ripeness and when they're most in season. And that's a great educational opportunity too. You can talk to the kids in your classroom about, it's October and why aren't we eating strawberries? Why are we eating squash? And sort of talking about that seasonal aspect. So our job at IATP is to help our partners sort of choose foods that will be available seasonally. So this protects against the product being unavailable. Like I said, we don't want to highlight strawberries in October. And it also keeps costs lower because we're focusing on highlighting a product when it's at its peak availability. So one thing to remember is that obviously it's important to connect with your farmer partners to make sure that the produce that you want to highlight in your program is going to be available when you want it. So it's that's a good conversation to have with with your growing partners in terms of what can we highlight and when will it be available. Just a side note, we do have another webinar coming up on Tuesday, July 18th that will focus specifically on that issue of procurement or obtaining local foods. So we won't get into those details here, but look out for an email about that upcoming webinar on the 18th. Next slide, please. Perfect. So as I mentioned, this idea of multiple exposures, we know from research that children in this age need between 8 and 20 exposures to a new food before they develop a taste preference for it. So children have this sort of aversion to trying new foods, and it's, as Erin said, it's completely developmentally appropriate. So we need to keep exposing them over and over and over again and supporting them in trying these foods between 8 and 20 times before it kind of finally clicks. So our approach is to highlight or to give children up to 4 exposures to a food each week. So we like to encourage our partners to highlight a particular food for 2 weeks at a time. And then on Mondays and Tuesdays, teachers would choose an activity related to that food. So for example, if you're if the highlighted food is a tomato, maybe on Monday you sing a song about tomatoes, or you read a book about a tomato seed that sprouts into a plant. So Mondays and Tuesdays, classroom activities related to that highlighted fruit or vegetable. Then on Wednesday, that food actually appears in the children's meals and snacks. So they've had already 2 exposures to that food. So by the time it appears on their plate, they're somewhat familiar with that food already, and they're expecting it, and they can sort of make that connection. Oh, this is the food that we sang the song about yesterday. So Wednesdays and Thursdays, that food would appear in either maybe a breakfast or lunch or a snack. And so by the end of that first week, children will have 4 exposures, and after 2 weeks, that's a total of 8 exposures. Because again, we know between 8 and 20 exposures is kind of the magic range that kids need to develop a taste preference for new food.
Myself, okay. So when you're thinking about what kinds of activities you want to do in the classroom to promote these local food items on those Mondays and Tuesdays, if you're following our model, we do have a curriculum. As Katie mentioned, it's available for free on our website. We have it organized so that for every food that you can highlight, it has many different activities related to just that food. It also has a different section that has foods that can be used, or activities that can be used for any food. And then it has another section that is activities that are related to farming in general and not just food specific. And we also, within those sections, have it laid out by these different categories of activities that are hopefully aligning with things that you already have to do in your classroom. So we have circle time activities, sensory and dramatic play, math and science, art, table talk, where you're actually eating the food and it's different conversational subjects that you can bring up while you eat the food during lunchtime. And then farming themes, and we also have different cultural elements from different cultures of communities that we've worked with. The idea here, as Barika mentioned, is that we don't want you to have this on top of your normal schedule as something that's an additional burden for you, but we want to give you content and ideas that you can use within the regular sections of your day that you are already going to be doing anyway. You already are doing circle time, so why not use a farm to early care theme for your circle time activity? So that's kind of our main goal with our curriculum, is to align it to things that you would already be doing, and hopefully then make it part of the normal way that you just do your classroom activities and integrate it.
So to make this a little bit more concrete, we wanted to share a couple of examples of possible activities that you could do in the classroom with the kids to sort of get your feet wet, get started with farm to early care. Guess That Seed is a game that we do really often in our staff trainings, and it's adaptable to a preschool setting. So essentially, quickly to explain this game, you divide everyone into groups, and each group has a clear container with a seed and then a seed packet or a picture of a vegetable or a fruit. Each group guesses which seeds match with which packet or picture, and then you reveal the answers. And so you could also do this as sort of just a matching game, so matching seeds with their pictures for the preschool group. Another activity that we like to suggest to teachers is sort of a mystery bag, so putting a fruit or vegetable in a paper bag and passing it around and letting the kids feel it and describe what they're feeling and guessing, what might this be, and then revealing it. So they're these activities don't have to be time intensive or labor intensive. It's just about sort of finding a creative way to get kids engaged with fruits or vegetables.
Mm-hmm. I love that mystery bag activity as something that you could do for every food, just as the first circle time activity that you do. And the kids get kind of scared about it. Like they have to reach into the bag and they don't know what's in there. And you can use a lot of thinking about your body and senses. So you can say, like, is it hard or smooth or soft or cold? And they really like to do that, and kids get really excited about it. It's very simple, but it really is an effective activity, so I really suggest that. Another activity that I learned from a partner at the Farm to Cafeteria conference a couple years ago was using fresh herbs And you actually, if you can get a couple different kinds of herbs like mint and sage, basil, things like that, green herbs, and then put them in a satchel that you can smell through, but you can't see what the herb looks like. You can also use Dixie cups and staple them closed at the top so you can still smell the herb, but you can't really see it. And you give each kid a satchel or Dixie cup that has the herb inside, and they can smell it. And they might not know what it is, but they can smell what it's like. And then they go around to all the other kids in the classroom and they try to match who has the same herb that they have. And then at the end, you open it up and you look and you say, oh, we do really have the same one. They look the same. And it really engages all of the senses so that you're using your sense of smell to identify. And also they might not have been exposed to herbs before, so this is a really fun activity. And you can do it with all different ages. So the partner that I learned it from was talking about doing it even with tiny babies. Even if they can't walk around and do the matching part, they can still smell the herbs and engage in that way. So that's a really fun activity too. The other one that I did want to share was a really cool activity that one of our partners did where they tried sprouting seeds together with their kids, and each of them you have to choose a seed that's pretty easy to sprout, like maybe a cucumber seed, and you put a little damp paper towel in a small plastic bag, like those little baggies that are only about 2 inches square. And then they punched a hole in the top of it and used yarn to make it into a necklace so that each kid had their own necklace that had the moist paper towel and their little seed inside of it. And then the seed would hang right by their heart. And they talked about how the kids needed to give the water to the plant. It would also need sunshine, but it also needed love to grow. And it was a very smart activity because the kids would constantly check at their necklace and see what was going on with the little seed, and they could see when it started to sprout, and it was very dramatic for them. So it's a really cool activity that you can do with this age group. I just love that so much. So in addition to that, you do, it would be great if you could do different types of activities that really engage with the farmers directly. These are some things that some of our partners have done. They did field trips, they had photos of the farmers and information about them that they could tell the kids about. They had conversations during meal times, and they did farm-themed activities in the classroom, so talking about weather and the day in the life of a farmer, things like that are in our curriculum. They wrote letters to the farmers where they would draw the pictures of the items that they had, things like that. So really make it real and show that there are real people who are really growing this food. It's coming from a real person. That really helps. And then, oh, Katie, you were going to talk about family engagement activities.
So one of the final core strategies that we like to talk about in farm to early care activities is this idea of family engagement. And this can mean anything. This can be sort of a display that is at the front of your site or your center. It could be a newsletter. It could be a little blurb on your menu. So it doesn't have to be elaborate, just making that connection between what's going on at school and what's going on in the home. And what we found is that parents really love the idea of using local foods and teaching kids about how food grows and where it comes from. They get very excited about that. And we've heard, one of the other ideas here for family engagement is maybe a family field trip to a farm. We've heard from partners who have done that is by far one of the most popular family engagement events of the entire year. So that's not accessible to everyone necessarily, but if you can do that, make that connection for the families, not just for the kids, that's a really powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. So in our model, there's a little bit of animation there for you. So in our model, basically what we're asking of the education staff is that they come to our training. So this is kind of a very condensed version of our training that you're attending today. They use our curriculum to do activities in the classroom. They help with family engagement. So a lot of times you as education staff are the front line to talking with the family. So we'd like you to do activities with them if you can. And then we do ask our partners to provide feedback to us so that we're always improving our program and making sure that it's working for your needs. And I did want to share just these best practices with you. We have a little bit of time here for questions at the end of the webinar. So if you want to type those either in the chat function or the Q&A function, we can get to those. And maybe I'll just leave these best practices up as we do the Q&A here. I did have one question. Katie, maybe you could talk to what you see as some of the challenges that education staff have shared with you as we launched the program with them, and then kind of how they addressed those challenges.
Sure. So I think Barika sort of queued this up really nicely because she spoke to one of the, I think probably the biggest concern of teaching staff, you know, whether or not, I would say most teaching staff are just excited about the concept of bringing local foods to young children, but their biggest concern is, gosh, we're so, you know, we're so busy already. How are we going to be able to fit this program into the work that we're already doing? And they sort of are hesitant about maybe the time commitment or seeing it as potentially a burden on them. But I think, again, as Barika really illustrated nicely, being able to make those connections between, you know, where can I fit these themes into what I'm already doing in the classroom? That's probably the best way, sort of taking time right up front to sort of plan and think about how to fit those into activities that you're already doing. Quickly, another worry that I hear frequently is that the kids won't like the food and there'll be a lot of food waste. And one way that we like to sort of work around that is this idea of, again, the multiple exposures and sort of making sure that kids are being introduced and becoming familiar with these foods outside of meal times. So in an environment where they're not expected to eat it right off the bat. So that helps them get comfortable. And so when the food does appear on their plate, either on that Wednesday or Thursday, they'll be excited and hopefully ready to try that food.
Yeah, that's a great point. I also just think that it's a relief for education staff to know that this is normal and that actually, to some extent, them rejecting the food at first is just something you have to deal with and have to go through for them to get to the point of liking the food. And maybe, you know, don't get too stressed about it because that's just what's going to happen, but it will work. That's a proven thing. So I think that's really important. It's been important for me to learn that too. We had another question. I see that someone's asking about examples of how we engage with families. I would say one of my favorite examples is at some of the centers that we've worked with, I've seen them do a family fun night where they actually have a time set aside for farm to early care where they did a hands-on cooking activity, and they had both the family, like the parents or grandparents or whoever is there from the family, and the kids were there together, and to choose a very simple recipe that they can do together, like a no heat recipe. So maybe they're just making, well, one very successful thing that we did that was really fun was actually making spring rolls with fresh vegetables, and then we made a dipping sauce together. If that sounds too elaborate, you could even do something simple like maybe making an apple with maybe like an almond butter on top as some kind of special snack that was a local apple, something like that. And then having the kids participate in helping to cook the food really makes them excited to try it themselves too. I think that's been a really successful family engagement technique. I will also say that in our curriculum, for every food item, we do provide sample language that you could just copy and paste into newsletters to your family. We also recommend that if you do a menu that you send home to family members, you can actually highlight the items that are going to be local, like maybe have them printed in green or have a little carrot icon next to the local items so that families really know what you're doing. Because sometimes I know you do so much and you can't always communicate it with them, but we've gotten very positive response from family members to these programs. So we do recommend making sure that you're communicating all of the work that you're doing. And I'm seeing we are up against the end of our time here. So thank you all for attending. Let me just get up here. Yeah, so if you're able to provide the brief evaluation survey that we have, we would love your feedback on how to improve our program. This is only our third webinar, so we would love your feedback on that as well. If you do need proof of attendance for attending, you can email Katie. Her email is right up there, and she can send you a webinar certificate of completion. We also have recorded this webinar. We'll make it available on our website, and when we send out the follow-up email, we'll include the link to where it's housed if you want to share it with your friends or watch it again. And then you can also attend our future Farm to Early Care webinar. We have one scheduled right now for July 18th that's specifically about where you can find and purchase local foods for your program. So thank you so much for attending. Thanks again to Barika for an amazing presentation that really made it concrete and real for all of you. And we hope you can join us for our future webinar on the 18th. So have a great day. Thanks, everyone.